As Israel and the US continue pounding targets deep within Iranian territory, the pillar of Iran's military, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has warned it's going to unleash its greatest offensive operation. The warning comes as the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and the IDF are trading strikes as residents in parts of Lebanon are told to evacuate. For more on this, let's go live to Doha now, where I'm joined by Adel Abdel Ghafar, Director of Foreign Policy Program at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. Good to have you with us. Now, firstly, you have been taking shelter there in Doha. Just tell us, how have you been holding up for the past few days, and what have the sentiments been like there?
Well, I think that it's calm on the surface, but there's a bit of trepidation, of course, because we've been asked to shelter at home. And occasionally we hear sort of anti-missile Patriot barrages and explosions and so on. So it's a bit unsettling. But at the same time, the government has done a good job in terms of continuity of services, delivery, and food. But there's definitely an element of uncertainty over what comes next, especially as this conflict potentially expands further and takes a toll on people.
I do want to talk briefly about Iran's formidable Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Lots has been talked about this unit. What do you know about where the IRGC stands at the moment after several targets and its leaders have been killed by US and Israeli strikes, not just in the past few days, but in the past couple of years?
I think the IRGC still retains formidable firepower, and even according to the foreign minister of Iran yesterday, there's a bit of a decentralization strategy by which IRGC commanders are now free to take action because, of course, the US and Israel have tried a decapitation strategy to take out the top of the regime. But now I think a lot of these units are operating across the region with some decentralization. And I think the IRGC is playing sort of a longer game. In the region, they're trying to put an extra cost on the Gulf countries so they can pressure the Trump administration. We've seen this in attacks that have happened in Kuwait, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia. Actually, a few hours ago, Aramco facilities were hit. I think also they're trying to put pressure on the US administration at the same time because President Trump wants a quick victory, sort of like what happened in Venezuela with Maduro. But I don't think this is going to be happening here. I think the Iranians are getting ready for a longer-term conflict. I think also, finally, Iran wants to put pressure on the global economy. So we've seen the closure of the Straits of Hormuz, attacks, as I mentioned, on facilities, energy facilities. This is likely to drive energy prices upward, will also create havoc in global markets as well. And this adds further pressure, not just on the Trump administration, but also on international partners across the world to call for de-escalation.
Yes. So where to now for what's happening within Iran? Donald Trump wants Iranians to force a regime change, but given that, the Iranian military continues to be such a powerful force there, and given that the Islamic regime also has millions of supporters within Iran, what can we expect to see happen internally, at least for the next few weeks?
Well, I think the ambition from Israel and from the US is some sort of quick regime change, but I don't really see that happening because, as you mentioned, the regime still has a base, still has control over the country. The command and control structure is still alive, and also there's no unified opposition to take control of the country. I'm kind of reminded of the Iraq War of 2003, where it was said, this is going to be easy, we're going to establish democracy. And none of this happened. What can happen, of course, is actually the Iranian state implodes. 90+ million population, various sects and communities, creating a massive instability in the region, refugees and so on. So I think that the future is a bit uncertain. But I think from an Iranian perspective, they're not seeking to actually beat the US or Israel. If they are able to survive the next week or two, that would classify for the Iranian government as a win, as it survives this onslaught. That's why I was mentioning to you earlier that they're going to put additional costs on neighboring countries, on the US, and on the global economy to move towards that.
Yes, and if that is the case, do you then see Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu pushing the envelope beyond strikes from a distance? Because if they were to pull back from the missile strikes, they would not achieve their aims.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is where the interests of Washington and Tel Aviv kind of diverge from an Israeli perspective. They want regime change. They want the destruction of Iran. Trump wants a quick win and doesn't want a massive impact on the global economy and, of course, on the U.S. economy. We also have to keep the U.S. Politics within the context of our analysis, because the MAGA movement is divided. They do not want a long-term war on Iran. They do not want to see body bags starting to return to the U.S. Even Vice President J.D. Vance and others within the movement are not really happy with this war and do not want it to expand. So as the war extends and as the global economy suffers, as the U.S. economy suffers, and potentially more U.S. servicemen are killed, this will add further pressure on the Trump White House to find some sort of off-ramp. I think the key word here is off-ramp, but I think the situation will worsen before it gets better.
Yes, and at the same time, the IDF and Hezbollah, they are trading rocket fire and missiles. Many thought that Hezbollah was so severely wounded by the IDF strikes over the past few years that saw several of its leaders killed. So did you expect this sort of response from Hezbollah, which we know is a key ally of Iran? And do you expect the same sort of response from the Houthis in Yemen?
Well, yeah, definitely Hezbollah has been degraded over the past 2 years of conflict, but it still retains capabilities underground, hidden underground. And I think from an Iranian perspective, they want to be able to open another front. So Israel is not solely focused on the Iranian conflict. I think that's the real objective. And we'll also see not just only Hezbollah, but as you mentioned, the Houthis, who will also fire on potential shipping and have also allegedly attacked Saudi Arabia Aramco facility via drone as well. So I think they want to get the Israelis to be bogged down and not fully focused on Iran in the coming period. And I think over the next week or two, we will see further escalation. We've seen an attack on the UK base in Cyprus, where many of the UK is flying its sorties in the region. I expect a further escalation in the next week.
Okay, Adel Abdel Ghafar, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.